Welcome to Podcast Buzz. In this episode, I will talk about conspiracy theory with definition, etymology, effects, explanation, and disproving theories. The Oxford English Dictionary defines conspiracy theory as the theory that an event or phenomenon occurs as a result of a conspiracy between interested parties. Spec. A belief that some covert but influential agency is responsible for an unexplained event. It cites a 1909 article in the American Historical Review as the earliest usage example, although it also appeared in print for several decades before. The earliest known usage was by the American author Charles Astor Bristed, in a letter to the editor published in the New York Times on January 11, 1863. He used it to refer to claims that British aristocrats were intentionally weakening the United States during the American Civil War in order to advance their financial interests. England has had quite enough to do in Europe and Asia without going out of her way to meddle with America. It was a physical and moral impossibility that she could be carrying on a gigantic conspiracy against us. But our masses, having only a rough general knowledge of foreign affairs, and not unnaturally somewhat exaggerating the space which we occupy in the world's eye, do not appreciate the complications which rendered such a conspiracy impossible. They only look at the sudden right-about-face movement of the English press and public, which is most readily accounted for on the conspiracy theory. The word conspiracy derives from the Latin con and spirare. Robert Blaskowitz comments that examples of the term were used as early as the 19th century and states that its usage has always been derogatory. According to a study by Andrew Mackenzie McHarg, in contrast, in the 19th century the term conspiracy theory simply suggests a plausible postulate of a conspiracy, and did not, at this stage, carry any connotations, either negative or positive, though sometimes a postulate so labeled was criticized. The term conspiracy theory is itself the subject of a conspiracy theory, which claims the term was popularized by the CIA in order to discredit conspiratorial believers, particularly critics of the Warren Commission, by making them a target of ridicule. In his 2013 book Conspiracy Theory in America, political scientist Lance DeHaven Smith suggested that the term entered everyday language in the United States after 1964, the year in which the Warren Commission published its findings on the Kennedy assassination, with the New York Times running 5 stories that year using the term. However, DeHaven Smith's suggestion has been criticized by Michael Butter, a professor of American literary and cultural history at the University of Tübingen, on the grounds that a CIA document which DeHaven Smith referenced, concerning criticism of the Warren Report, which was publicly released in 1976 after a Freedom of Information Act request, does not contain the phrase conspiracy theory in the singular, and only mentions conspiracy theories once. In the sentence, conspiracy theories have frequently thrown suspicion on our organization. For example, by falsely alleging that Lee Harvey Oswald worked for us. Conspiracy theory: an attempt to explain harmful or tragic events as the result of the actions of a small, powerful group. Such explanations reject the accepted narrative surrounding those events. Indeed, the official version may be seen as further proof of the conspiracy. Conspiracy theories increase in prevalence in periods of widespread anxiety, uncertainty, or hardship, as during wars and economic depressions and in the aftermath of natural disasters like tsunamis, earthquakes, and pandemics. This fact is evidenced by the profusion of conspiracy theories that emerged in the wake of the September 11th attacks in 2001 and by the more than 2,000 volumes on U.S. Pres. John F. Kennedy's assassination. This suggests that conspiratorial thinking is driven by a strong human desire to make sense of social forces that are self-relevant, important, and threatening. The content of conspiracy theories is emotionally laden and its alleged discovery can be gratifying. The evidentiary standards for corroborating conspiracy theories are typically weak, and they are usually resistant to falsification. The survivability of conspiracy theories may be aided by psychological biases and by distrust of official sources. Effects of belief in conspiracy theories. Exposure to media that endorse conspiracies increases belief. There is evidence that viewing the Oliver Stone movie JFK increased belief in a conspiracy to assassinate Kennedy, and decreased belief in the official account that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. A further outcome was that, compared with people who were about to view the movie, those who had seen it expressed less interest in political participation. It may be that distrust of those in power predicts and is caused by belief in government conspiracies. Researchers have investigated belief in AIDS conspiracies. The belief that AIDS was created by the U.S. government to kill homosexuals and African Americans, and attitudes toward condom use. This research has shown that the more strongly African American males believe in this conspiracy, the less favorable their attitudes toward condom use are. and in turn the less likely they are to use condoms. There is also evidence that these beliefs lead to distrust of research institutions and are a significant barrier to getting African Americans to participate in AIDS clinical trials. Such distrust did not develop in a vacuum, starting in 1932 and continuing for 40 years. The U.S. Public Health Service, working with the Tuskegee Institute, studied the effect of syphilis on 399 African American men. The researchers conducting the Tuskegee syphilis study withheld treatment and allowed more than 100 men to die. Despite the discovery of penicillin as a standard cure in 1947, it is clearly worth noting that governments do at least occasionally conspire against their own citizens. Explanations of conspiracy theories. American historian Richard Hofstadter explored the emergence of conspiracy theorizing by proposing a consensus view of democracy. Competing groups would represent the interests of individuals, but they would do so within a political system that everyone agreed would frame the bounds of conflict. For Hofstadter, those who felt unable to channel their political interests into representative groups would become alienated from this system. These individuals would not accept the statements of opposition parties as representing a fair disagreement. Rather, differences in views would be regarded with deep suspicion. Such alienated people would develop a paranoid fear of conspiracy, thus making them vulnerable to charismatic rather than practical and rational leadership. This would undermine democracy and lead to totalitarian rule. In the paranoid style in American politics, Hofstadter proposed that this is not an individual pathology but instead originates in social conflict that raises fears and anxieties, which leads to status struggles between opposed groups. The resulting conspiracy theorizing derives from a collective sense of threat to one's group, culture, way of life, and so on. Extremists at either end of the political spectrum could be expected to develop a paranoid style. On the right, McCarthyism promoted paranoid notions of communist infiltration of American institutions, and QAnon, popular among fanatical supporters of U.S. Donald Trump alleged that prominent Democrats were part of an international cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles, cannibals, and child murderers. On the left was the belief that the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 were an inside job perpetrated by government and corporate interests. Hofstadter's approach is notable because it places the root of conspiracies in intergroup processes, which means that his theory can account for the ebb and flow of conspiracy theories over time. Disproving conspiracies. A 1995 study by American psychologist John McCoskey attempted to provide an explanation for the difficulty of falsifying conspiracy theories. McCoskey gave advocates and opponents of the Kennedy conspiracy a balanced description of arguments for and against a conspiracy to assassinate the president. McCoskey's prediction was that those who favored and those who opposed the conspiracy theory would both regard that very same statement as evidence in favor of their position. McCoskey believed that this would occur because proponents on both sides engaged in biased assimilation, whereby information that supports one's position is uncritically accepted, whereas contrary information is scrutinized and discredited. Further, because of attitude polarization, when people encounter ambiguous information, they tend to endorse their original position even more strongly than they did prior to encountering the information. This proved to be the case for both advocates and opponents of the Kennedy conspiracy. Australian philosopher Steve Clarke proposed that conspiratorial thinking is maintained by the fundamental attribution error, which states that people overestimate the importance of dispositions, such as individual motivations or personality traits, while underestimating the importance of situational factors, such as random chance and social norms, in explaining the behavior of others. Clarke observed that this error is typical of conspiratorial thinking. People maintain adherence to their conspiratorial beliefs because to dispense with the conspiracy would be to discount human motives and events. Clarke further suggested that the ultimate reason people make the fundamental attribution error is because they have evolved to do so. Humans evolved in tightly knit groups where understanding the motives of others was critical for the detection of malevolent intentions. The cost of making an error in identifying others' insidious motives was small relative to the cost of not identifying such motives. Clarke proposed that people are psychologically attuned to discount situational factors over dispositional factors in explaining others' behavior.